The single spey cast is probably the most efficient cast. It requires less rod movement than any of the other casts and loads the rod up very quickly. The key to this cast is we're getting the line all the way straight down below us. The line's tight in the surface film. Foregrip up on top of the rod, underhand gripping right at the base of the rod. And what we're going to do is we're going to pivot this rod at a 45-degree angle, starting slightly at my bank. And I'm just going to untwist my body very little, swing the rod around, and the line lands straight on the water in a nice straight line direction of the cast. And I've got a nice loop of line tight behind the rod tip. All together, rod 45 degrees, pointed slightly at my bank. I'm just going to pivot my body around, touch down to the rod, nice loop, and a nice, beautiful forward cast. It requires really very little rod movement. In fact, I'm going to make the same cast, straight downstream, the line's hanging. I'm going to make this same cast, and I'm not even going to cast with my arms. I'm just going to pivot my body around and then slightly move forward, and I get a fairly good cast. I mean, that wasn't a great cast, but most of the cast was there. We have to put very little motion in with our arms to get a good, tight, powerful cast. It's very important that the rod tip starts at our bank. And what this allows me to do is it allows me to pivot the rod tip. Pivot, 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 pivot. And that brings a nice loop of line right around the front of me, right even with the rod tip behind me. The line's positioned in a nice straight line to make our forward cast. Pivot. Good loop suspended behind the rod tip, and a nice forward cast. Okay, so I'm facing directly across stream. This is the direction I want to put the fly. With my rod tip pointed slightly to my bank and on about a 45-degree angle, my elbows and shoulders relaxed in fairly tight to my body, I'm simply going to pivot my body around with the rod tip on the 45-degree plane, set the fly down, make the forward casting stroke. This is an easy cast, but the timing is precise. You've got to lay the fly down slightly upstream from the direction of your casting stroke to be successful. If I were to cast this cast, if I were to make this setup and I don't pivot around far enough, I drop the cast on the downstream side of me. When I come forward, you can see we've crossed over the line, we've crossed over the direction of the cast, and we end up with a tangle. If I pivot around too far and swing the rod wildly upstream, now my line is all the way upstream and I'm going to come forward and I've got way too much line stick. It's absolutely essential the timing of this cast is proper. 45 degrees up, slightly pointed to my bank, my body's twisted about 45 degrees. I'm simply going to keep this rod tip at this plane, untwist my body, and a nice smooth motion. You can see how the line lays down. It's kind of a large U with the leader and the fly right in front of me and the line coming around in a U until it connects with the tip of the rod. That's the perfect setup. Rod tip to the bank, 45 degrees, elbows in, pivot around, same plane, pivot around slightly, touchdown, stroke. The touchdown of as soon as the fly line comes around and kisses the surface of the water, I'm into my forward stroke immediately. Rod tip held high, 45 degrees, pivot around, kiss the surface of the water, out goes the forward cast. Let's take a look at that D formation behind the rod tip. As I bring the rod tip around on that parallel plane, I kiss the water on the surface. That D loop is extended upstream, but not very far behind the rod tip. That's really essential because this is one of the casts that you can make without having much D loop extended behind the rod tip. In fact, I'm going to walk over here by these trees. One of the key benefits to this cast is I don't need a lot of casting room behind me. I can throw a very shallow D loop on a single spey cast, and I don't have more than about 4 or 5 feet behind me, and I still get an effective load on the rod. With the rod pointed slightly to the bank, kiss the surface of the line on the water, and make your forward casting stroke. In fact, you can make very, very shallows. I'll back up a little further yet. Rod tip pointed to the bank. Kiss the surface of the water. Cast it straight out. It's a wonderful casting tool without much room behind us. Let's talk a little bit about the forward stroke. Let me show you an exercise that's going to help. I call it the hop cast, where I simply hop the line back to me, kiss it down in the water, and cast it back down. We're just simply bringing the rod tip up slowly, hop it back, touchdown, forward cast. This is the same timing as in the single spey cast. I don't have the twist or the turn or change of the direction, but I have the timing of the forward stroke. Hop, touchdown, forward casting stroke. Hop, touchdown, forward casting stroke. You can really feel the line load up with this cast. Lift, hop, touchdown, stroke. It's a beautiful cast. Now let's put it in combination with the twist. Rod tip pointed to our bank. We come around slowly. Touchdown, cast. I'm going to see how slow I can make this cast, because the slower we do it, the easier it is to learn. In fact, it's not a bad idea. What we have our students do all the time is start in real short. Start in with about 30 feet of line out or so, and now you don't have to move hardly at all. Just touchdown, stroke. Beautiful cast. Let's try it again. Lift up, pivot, touchdown, stroke. All I've got to do now to get better is lengthen that line out a little bit, and we'll lengthen it out in about 10-foot increments. And again, let's see how easy it can be. We start with the rod tip pointed slightly to our bank. Body's twisted about 45 degrees. Untwist, touchdown, stroke. Well, I don't know of any easier cast than that. It's pretty easy. It only gets complicated as we let out a little bit more line and the timing gets a little more critical. Rod tip pointed to our bank. I'm twisted 45 degrees. My stance is straight across stream. Come around on that horizontal plane, touchdown, forward cast. It's a great cast. Let's talk a little bit about some of the problems with this cast. Almost everybody, when they begin this cast, wants to use too much arm. In fact, they're not using any body. They simply bring the cast straight down, straight from them like this, and they're trying to move the rod in this position right here, and the line's almost straight upstream from me. As we lengthen out the distance of the cast, it gets a little more critical in regards to the timing of the cast. But notice that my rod tip is pointed to the bank. And this is absolutely paramount, because as I untwist it, my line, leader, and fly land slightly upstream from me, and it puts the fly in a nice upstream position so we're not crossing paths on the forward casting stroke. If I was to make that same cast with the rod tip parallel to the bank and not pointed slightly at the bank, I don't have the same degree of twisting, I don't have the same distance to move the rod, the line lands a little short, and then it comes across and grabs a line on its forward trajectory, and you get tangled up there. So when in doubt, shorten up a little bit, try it short, rod pointed to the bank, swing around easily, touchdown, cast, beautiful. Do it slow and easy. The acceleration, the timing of the cast is constant. We're simply going to swing the rod around in a semicircle, touchdown. We have a little bit more time than you think. It's real easy to accelerate this cast so fast that you actually don't have an anchor on the water and you lose the load of the rod. For example, this. Well, I've just come back and actually hit those trees back there. So if we don't have an anchor on the water, if our line does not anchor on the water, we're not going to have a very good cast. Come around, kiss the water, punch it out, nice cast. And again, practice that hop cast. If you want to get the timing down a little more, hop it back, touchdown, cast. Hop it back, touchdown, cast. Single spey casting allows us to change the angle of the cast to fit the needs. For example, if I'm fishing a surface or near surface skater, I might want to angle my cast at 45 degrees down. Pocket water would be a good example of this, where we want to bubble and skate and wake that thing across nice and slowly. I'm just going to simply set my setup not quite as far upstream, and I got a beautiful cast 45 degrees down and across. However, if I'm fishing a wet fly on a broad wet fly swing, I may want to set my cast up 90 degrees across current. To do that, we want to make absolutely sure again that we're pointed toward my bank, because I'm going to make the swing a little bit more dramatic so I can set my cast up a little further upstream. Just a little more swing, nice upstream cast, and a straight 90-degree cast right across stream. So we have a lot more latitude in the direction of the cast than what most people think they can accomplish with the single spey cast. In summary, we know that we can practice this cast by starting short. It's a great idea to get the timing down. We just start with about 30 feet of line out. We hardly have to move at all. We simply untwist, touch down. I can let it sit there, as a matter of fact, and still get a nice forward cast out. As I get my confidence level up and my skills, we'll let about 5 feet out at a time. Rod tip pointed to the bank, 45 degrees, level plane, pivot, touchdown, stroke. A nice, beautiful single spey cast again. Let's let out another 5 feet. All I'm going to do now is slow my casting stroke down a little bit, put just a little more swing so we can make sure we move that line leader junction upstream of our casting plane. 45 degrees. Swing, touchdown, stroke. It's a terrific cast. The single spey cast is my favorite cast. It's the quickest, most efficient, and I think the most fun.